They were afraid of us. Because the ones that survived changed.
Ruby, you are very rare. Among the most powerful.
We're going to a place where kids can live together on the outside. The only people who would ever help us were us.
Whatever happens, don't stop! For their safety and yours, please turn over your children.
I'm smart enough to know you're hiding something. And you're smart enough to be hiding it.
I just didn't want you to be afraid of me. The more that I try to control it, the more damage that I do.
I can show you how to use your strengths the way they're meant to be used. We can fight back.
We don't have to stay in darkness. We've survived all of this. I will fight for all of us.
In an effort to steer an election, which is criminal, you look no further than Hillary Clinton and the DNC, who financed this entire operation, who orchestrated it. So, Mr. Mueller, I encourage you to kind of flip the coin around the other way if you're capable of doing so, because I've just did walk in an effort to generate a crisis. It's agitation propaganda. It's Saul Alinsky on steroids. It's very sharp people who know how to manipulate the media and create a problem. And it's all orchestrated. It's all linked. So if you're looking for Russian collusion, whatever that is, or let's use the right word, conspiracy. If you're looking for persons who are sending money to Russian operatives in an effort to steer an election, which is criminal, you look no further than Hillary Clinton and the DNC, who financed this entire operation, who orchestrated it. So, Mr. Mueller, I encourage you to kind of flip the coin around the other way if you're capable of doing so, because I've just demonstrated for you and explained in no uncertain terms exactly what the sequence was to this sort of non-official intelligence operation seeking to generate a crisis at the paid expense of Hillary Clinton and the DNC in an effort to steer an election. And when you look at it from that perspective, I think you have a whole new appreciation for what's really going on, whether it's in a courtroom in Alexandria, Virginia, or a Trump Tower, or in the swamp here in DC. So I hope you found that interesting. I hope that gives you a new perspective on exactly what's going on and what the real motives are behind all this, because I think those facts are so important, and the timeline and the associations. This gives you an understanding that I hope you didn't have before. I'm Chris Farrell on Watch.
This memo is nothing but the distilling, the reducing of thousands of pages of documents provided to us by the department and the Bureau. So there's nothing in this memo that the department is not already aware of. If you think your viewers want to know whether or not the dossier was used in court proceedings, whether or not it was vetted before it was used, whether or not it's ever been vetted, if you are interested in who paid for the dossier, if you're interested in Christopher Steele's relationship with Hillary Clinton and the Democrat National Committee, then yes, you'll want the memo to come out. If you're Adam Schiff, who is consistently wrong when it comes to issues of disclosure, he didn't want us to find out any of this information, Chris. He fought. In fact, GPS went to court. Fusion GPS went to court to keep us from finding out that the Democrats paid for the dossier. So if you're Adam Schiff, of course you don't want the information to come out. You didn't want us to find it in the first place. This memo answers what I think are really legitimate questions, and I do think the FBI should look at it before it is released, and I have provided that counsel to Chairman Nunes, and I think that he has taken that under advisement. So I want to play face-up poker. I want the Bureau to know everything that's in the memo. I think you'll be surprised. It is not a hit piece on the department and the FBI. I would not have participated in it if that's what it was.
Let me pick up on this, because the reports are, and you've kind of indicated that in your answer, that the memo centers on this question of the FISA application, the Department of Justice FBI application in 2016 for a warrant to conduct electronic surveillance against this fella, then Trump campaign manager Carter Page. Your complaint, according to reports, is that you say that when they made that application, they didn't talk about the role of the Russia dossier, and especially the fact that it was opposition research paid for by the Clinton campaign. The Democrats, and yes, Adam Schiff is leading the charge, say you're cherry-picking the information. One, that the FISA warrant on it, Carter Page, is not as central as you're making it, and two, that there was a lot more in the application than just the dossier, that the FBI did not rely just on the dossier to get the warrant.
Well, I can't even confirm for you that there is a FISA warrant, and I can't confirm for you who it's on, because that is classified, and I'm not going to disseminate classified information. I'll just ask you again, are you interested in whether or not the world's premier law enforcement agency relied on a work product produced, paid for by the Democrat National Committee? Are you interested in whether or not...
I guess the question I'm just asking is this, sir. And yes, I can understand you're not going to confirm it, but we're talking about the FISA warrant of Carter Page. Did they rely just on the dossier, or did they rely on a lot of other material?
Well, for me to answer that question is confirmation that there is one. I will. Let me ask you this, Chris. If they relied on it half, is that significant enough for the American people to know? If they relied on it at all, do you want to know that? If you're the judge, do you want to know if a third of what you're providing to the court was paid for by a political opponent? So whether it was relied upon 80% or 20%, do you want to know that the Democrat National Committee paid for material that was never vetted, that was included in a court proceeding? Do you want to know whether or not the primary source in these court proceedings had a bias against one candidate? Do you want to know whether or not he said he'd do anything to keep that candidate from becoming elected?
The big question now for President Trump and the country is whether the revelations in that FISA memo are reason enough to end Robert Mueller's Russia investigation. Let's ask former FBI spokesperson John Iannarelli in Minneapolis, and with me here in Washington, David Rifkin, an attorney who served in both the Reagan and Bush 41 administrations. David, I want to start with you. Should this Mueller investigation be ended with what you know now?
I would not say it should be ended, but it certainly is troubling, and if further investigation reveals that there are additional misconduct that led to the Mueller investigation.
Well, this memo says that the FISA warrants were applied for with the essential element in those warrants being the dossier. They admitted a material fact to the FISA judge, namely that the dossier was an Oppo research document from Trump's opponent.
Which they did not tell the FISA court.
Right, but I'm curious about why you say this is just one, if they find out more. I mean, what else could there, I guess there could be more, but isn't that enough? I mean, if you are essentially lying to a federal judge in the middle of a political campaign 2 weeks before an election, and doesn't that show a motivation that's not exactly pure as the driven snow?
No, but of course, it's very troubling. It should be investigated.
Troubling.
But Mueller himself or his staff are not directly involved in this. I would rather focus on what...
Yeah, but it was started, David, because...
I understand the fruit of a poisonous tree. But look, even if there is no Mueller investigation, what happened here is enormously troubling. It's a serious misconduct by the FBI and DOJ. Let's get to the bottom of it. Let's prosecute the people involved. I would rather focus on the merits of a case versus talking about, at this stage, what are its implications.
John, I think the FBI today, if I were a veteran of the FBI, I wouldn't be mad at the Trump people or Nunes. I'd be mad at the leadership of the FBI who allowed the agency to be politicized and frankly used in many ways by people who had an agenda against this candidate Trump and then after the election President Trump. I think the FBI agents were used and the upper echelon of the FBI made huge judgments of error at the very least.
I think there's many people today inside and outside the FBI that feel exactly the same way. First and foremost, there is no reason an investigation of this magnitude should be run out of FBI headquarters. The Washington field office has 1,000 agents, teams of people that do this sort of thing. This is a problem of management to have let the executive leaders allow this to occur. That's one of the things Director Wray needs to address and address immediately.
Well, I still am trying to figure out why Director Wray was saying there's a grave concern about releasing this memo. The memo has nothing classified in it. There are no sources, no methods, no compromised foreign agents' names, none of that. Like all of that. Why were they putting out, including Wray, why were they putting out these false justifications for keeping that memo secret? That to me is very concerning. And I have no reason to not like Christopher Wray. I'm sure he's a wonderful person, but why are you saying it's going to be grave damage? People doing the grave damage to the FBI, the FBI leadership.
Simple answer, because it looks bad for the FBI. It's pure self-protection, which dovetails with the fact that it took over a year to turn this over and required a threat of a contempt.
Explain what you're saying.
It took a year for the congressional committees to get this information.
Oh, from the FBI. It's like pulling teeth.
Of contempt. It's pulling teeth. It's nothing to do with classified information. It has to do with the fact this is a serious misconduct that makes FBI look bad.
What should happen now?
Serious investigation. Let me just flag one thing.
Yeah.
It's not just what was in this application. The timing is very suspicious of the application. 2 weeks
October
before
21st.
the election, right? Why not do it months earlier? Why not do it after elections? There's a DOJ policy that's reflected in the 2012 memo by Eric Holder and the Attorney General, which says you don't investigate, absent exceptional circumstances, political campaigns because of a danger it would leak and interfere with the electoral process.
Why did he write that memo? Is that because during the Benghazi stuff? Was that Benghazi?
Well, let's assume that he wrote it because he believed that this was the right thing to do. But yes, it was during the 2012 elections. You don't do this unless it's absolutely essential. So the real question is not only why did you withhold information from a court, why did you do it on October 21?
Yep. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. General Clapper, Ms. Yates, good to see you again. Good to have you back here. Ms. Yates, I remember so well your confirmation here. And I remember one senator just bearing in on you, tensely bearing in on you, saying, would you stand up to the President of the United States if you thought he was asking you to do something unlawful? He's demanding under oath for you to say yes, you would stand up. And you told then Senator Jeff Sessions of Alabama that's what you would do. And it appears to me that you've kept your word. Apparently it's okay to...
Is that a statement or a question, asshole?
Depending upon who the administration is.
This old motherfucker needs to go too, Leahy. He's part of that crew, you know, the Citizens for Responsibility. Noah Bookbinder was his law clerk.
Most personal students would say it was unconstitutional. You said you weren't going.
Senator Leahy is the one that's turned loose their little Washington, D.C. law firm hit squad on President Trump and anybody that surrounds Trump. They claim to be a C34 nonprofit, but what they are is a paid-for assassination of lawyers to Republicans, especially the president.
Going to uphold it. I wish that Mr. Sessions and others had kept as consistent in this administration as they did in the last.
Simply said is the facts, which are that based on uniform intelligence assessments, the Russians were responsible for hacking the DNC.
The forces that were at work in 2016 were unlike anything that I've ever seen or read about. It was a perfect storm. But I was on the way to winning. until the combination of Jim Comey's letter on October 28th and Russian WikiLeaks raised doubts in the minds of people who were inclined to vote for me but got scared off. Within an hour or two of the Hollywood Access tape being made public, the Russian theft of John Podesta's emails hit WikiLeaks. What a coincidence. So, I mean, you just can't make this stuff up. There have been some studies done since the election that if you look, let's pick Facebook, if you look at Facebook, the vast majority of the news items posted were fake. They were connected to, as we now know, the 1,000 Russian agents who were involved in delivering those messages. They were connected to the bots that are just out of control. We see now this new information about Trump's Twitter account being populated by millions of bots.
Who extended these warrants? Mr. Rosenstein. And Mr. Rosenstein answers to no one. He is a veteran member of the deep state. He has a serious conflict because the information regarding FISA warrants and how they were issued against the Trump campaign, which he refuses to turn over to Congress, has a major conflict in it, in that he is the one who extended these warrants. This is why he should step down or be terminated.
We have a new crisis in our foreign policy, and this one's a big one. Mexico has completely lost its mind and voted for a far, far out Castro wannabe for their presidency. Andrés Manuel López Obrador. He's known in Mexico as AMLO by his initials, AMLO. And he described Castro as a great man. He wants to emulate Hugo Chavez, and he has a 1,500-mile border with the United States. He'd run twice before, and I ran the campaigns that defeated him. But this time he was elected. I was not involved this time. And it is a catastrophe for the United States that our media is not really giving its due accord. Right now, Mexico, of course, is sending a lot of illegal immigrants to the United States, but the government isn't doing it. But under AMLO, there's going to be a conscious effort by the Mexican government to encourage people to move to the United States and vote left and undermine the United States through the electoral process, taking advantage of our porous laws about who can vote. Included in those illegal immigrants are going to be terrorists, drug kingpins, drug dealers, and there will be conscious effort by AMLO to destabilize the United States through immigration. Commercially, the American firms that moved to Mexico and the wealthy Americans that did are facing expropriation or nationalization of their property, their factories, their possessions. No leftist regime says that at the outset, but clearly that's where AMLO is headed. And there is an emerging anti-American coalition in South America that has been looking for a leader ever since Castro first became sick and then died. It consists of Cuba, Nicaragua, El Salvador, Venezuela, and Bolivia, and Ecuador was part of it, but it seems to be returning to normal. And now Mexico is joining that group and will be its clear leader. And you can count on leftist revolutions spreading all over South America. This is an absolute fiasco for American foreign policy. Now, in the U.S., the blame game is going to start. And just as Nixon ran in the 50s on the slogan of "Who lost China?" So the Democrats are going to trumpet that Trump lost Mexico, that his anti-Mexican rhetoric, his talk about immigration, his advocacy of a border wall all contributed, they're going to say, to AMLO's election. That would be totally untrue. It would be complete fabrication. It had nothing to do with it. The fact is that the reason AMLO was elected was that the long-time governing party was so totally and horribly corrupt in this last administration that nobody would vote for it. And the reformist administration before that, the PAN, which was conservative, led the drug war, and 130,000 Mexicans died in a country a third the size of the United States. And because of the war discrediting Pan and the corruption discrediting the PRI, AMLO's party, called Moreno, which means brown, was the only party left. But this is a real disaster in American foreign policy and a new phony issue for the Democrats. As if
Deposition 102, and I don't know if we have that in our document. This is the one that has Ms. Herwig on it. And the email says suggested edits from me, that is from Carolyn Porcorny, who was in the Office of Government Affairs, OAG's Office of Attorney General, Paige being Paige Herwig, and Office of Legislative Affairs. So they've all reviewed it, and they made changes. Now, here's what's interesting about this document, and I'm showing up for our cameras so you all can see it, but our radio audience, let me tell you what's there. They black out what they edited. But on that email, and this is what we now know, was this lawyer who's now with the Senate Judiciary Committee. Now, what is the oversight then that's going on with the Senate Judiciary Committee?
Well, this is the look behind the scenes that people need to understand, Jay, because the next thing that the committee would do was actually call to either testify in open hearing or maybe do an interview behind the scenes with the people that made edits of the talking points. So you would expect someone like Paige Herwig to be one of the very first people that they called in to say what really happened behind the scenes, what were you driving for, what were the talking points. We understand that they were redacted, they have, maybe exceptions, but we have clearance to see those. They would want to talk to Paige Herwig. Well, do you think Paige Herwig, Jay, is going to invite Paige Herwig to come and either testify or do an interview behind the scenes? I don't think so. So, honestly, the natural course of these investigations is not possible here because they're the same people involved.
Because you could not make this stuff up. I mean, we were looking at the document, so let me get it a step further for everybody. So then there's an email at 151. It's document number 105, again, like it was in a deposition, so we have the actual document. And Logan, this one says, thanks, Melanie. We'll show this to the AG now. Can you also prepare a couple of TPs for the press avail? TPs being talking points.
That's right. As we all know, what kind of unraveled after this was a lot of, we talked about our grandkids, and we talked about a lot of those things that came up that a lot of people just laughed at because even if it was true, it was still a power play. And it was still something that was not appropriate. Even like let's put that on the even the fact of if everything she said was true, it still was not an appropriate action that took place.
So I look at that and the press availed. So at that point, Harry, it becomes very clear here that they know, and that's why we're giving you some real detail on this. Let me play Loretta Lynch's sound on this because this is what she said.
Well, I did see the president at the Phoenix airport the other night. As I was landing, he was headed out. He did come over and say hello and speak to my husband and myself and talk about his grandchildren and his travels and things like that. So that was the